He was just a human, until the alien princess picked him. He had spent his whole career as a human cultural attaché, moving quietly through galactic corridors, observing, reporting, and making notes that no one ever read. He was not a soldier, nor a scientist, nor a diplomat of influence. To most species in the Galactic Union, he was invisible, a weak, fragile human who could barely hold his own in a crowd of towering, muscular, or otherwise extraordinary beings. Humans were tolerated, often pitied, and rarely considered serious players in galactic politics. They survived because they adapted, because they persisted, and because no one could imagine humans rising above their apparent fragility. The Grand Summit was unlike anything Evan had ever seen. The chamber stretched wider than several city blocks, lined with floating platforms that defied gravity, and filled with representatives from hundreds of species. Some had tentacles, some had wings, some had multiple limbs or translucent skin that shimmered with their emotions. Others were cloaked in metals or crystal that seemed alive. The air thrummed with tension, excitement, and pride. Each species had come to display their strength, their achievements, and their dominance. In comparison, humans were small, quiet, and easily overlooked. Evan's delegation had arrived early, as instructed, to stand in the back, take notes, and avoid attracting attention. Even from a distance, he could see the impressive displays of power. The Orcsians, a species twice the size of humans with exoskeletons hard enough to repel energy blasts, were demonstrating their combat drills. The Ithari, winged beings with hypnotic eyes, moved in perfect synchronicity, their motions elegant and terrifying. And there, near the center, floated the royal procession of the Clethari, a species whose political and military power was legendary across systems. It was here, amidst the grandeur and the overwhelming sense of superiority, that Evan felt the familiar mixture of awe and fear that always accompanied him when he entered alien spaces. He reminded himself quietly, observe, record, survive. That was his role, nothing more. Nothing less. The summit began with speeches. Leaders extolled their civilizations, their achievements, their mastery over planets and technologies. Most of it was incomprehensible to Evan, filled with terms and concepts that humans had yet to invent. Yet despite the foreignness, he noticed patterns. Pride, dominance, and power were valued above all else. Diplomacy existed, but it was often a thin veneer over displays of superiority. Evan shifted slightly, trying not to draw attention as he scribbled notes in his small data pad. He had been trained to blend in, but in a room where every being exuded confidence and strength, blending in felt impossible. Humans were simply too fragile, too ordinary. Even the smallest glare from an alien could be intimidating. Evan had long accepted that humanity's survival relied on being underestimated. If anyone expected humans to lead, fight, or conquer, they would be gravely mistaken. And then the princess arrived. She was not announced with fanfare, and no trumpet of authority preceded her steps. Yet the room seemed to bend around her presence. She was tall, taller than most humans, but not grotesquely so. Her skin shimmered in a way that made light ripple across her body. Her eyes were the color of distant stars, cold and bright, and her expression held both judgment and curiosity. Aliens who were normally proud and boastful lowered their heads subtly, some even stepping back instinctively. Evan could not move. He had read about such beings. The apex of the Clethari race, trained from birth to command, feared across multiple star systems, capable of feats that could obliterate entire ships. Yet here she was, moving slowly, deliberately, scanning the room as though she were searching for something or someone. The delegates shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered to each other. Warriors straightened, diplomats held their notes tighter. The room waited for her to make her choice. And then she stopped. She stopped in front of Evan. There was a moment, a frozen heartbeat in which nothing moved, Every being in the room turned to look. Some gasped audibly, others could not hide their shock. The princess's gaze settled on Evan's face and she spoke, her voice both soft and commanding. This one. She did not gesture to another human. She did not look at the stronger warriors nearby. She did not choose a representative from a species known for intelligence, strength, or cunning. She chose Evan. The delegates erupted. Voices shouted across the hall, accusations, confusion, disbelief. How could a mere human, so small, so weak, so ordinary, be chosen by the princess? The concept was absurd. Evan himself could not comprehend what had just happened. He had not prepared for this. No one had prepared him for this. His heart raced. His hands shook. Yet the princess's eyes held a steady, unwavering calm. There was no mistake. There was no uncertainty. She had chosen him. He was swiftly escorted away by Clethari guards, towering beings with muscles like steel and armor that glowed with energy fields. He tried to protest, to explain that he was not suitable, that someone else should take his place. His words fell on deaf ears. The princess's decision was final. No one could argue with it, not even the council. In the private chambers of the Clethari palace, Evan finally had a moment to breathe. The walls shimmered with living metal, adjusting subtly to the atmosphere. The princess stood before him, silent, her eyes studying him as if peeling back the layers of his soul. "You will come with me," she said simply. "You will be my bond." Evan swallowed. Bond. I don't understand. Why me? I am just a human. I'm not strong. I'm not smart compared to anyone here. I can't. You misunderstand, she interrupted. Strength is not measured by the size of your muscles, nor intelligence by the speed of your calculations. There is a quality in your species that others lack: resilience, adaptability, the capacity to endure what others cannot. That is why I chose you. Her words were strange, almost unbelievable. Humans were weak. Everyone believed it. And yet here was the apex of one of the galaxy's most powerful species, telling him that his weakness, his persistence, his endurance was valuable. Evan could not comprehend it. Endure? What? Survive? What? "The galaxy will test you," she said, her voice calm, yet carrying weight beyond any human measure. "Your species is underestimated because they do not see what you endure, what you overcome, what you survive. That will change, and it will begin with you." The words sank into him slowly. They were not a promise of safety. They were not a gift. They were a warning. And somewhere deep down, Evan realized that his life would never be ordinary again. Over the next few hours, he was introduced to the palace, to the protocols of the Clethari, and to the delicate politics that governed their society. Every hallway whispered power struggles. Every meeting hinted at plots. Every glance carried subtle threats. For the first time in his life, Evan felt the weight of responsibility, not as a human observer, not as a minor diplomat, but as a chosen bond of the most powerful princess in the galaxy. Yet even as he moved through the opulent halls, he could not ignore the disbelief surrounding his choice. Outside the palace, ambassadors whispered among themselves, questioning the wisdom of the princess, questioning the competence of humans, questioning the balance of power in the universe. But inside, Evan began to notice small truths. While he could not compete physically with the Clethari guards or outthink the alien strategists, he noticed subtleties they missed. The minor fluctuations in energy fields, the hesitation in certain gestures, the micro-expressions that revealed hidden intentions. Humans had survived not by dominating, but by observing, by listening, by adapting to circumstances. And for the first time, Evan realized that this might be exactly what the galaxy had overlooked for centuries. That night, as the Clethari palace settled into quiet, Evan sat alone in a small chamber assigned to him. He stared at the stars outside the massive window, stretching endlessly across the galaxy. He thought of Earth, of humanity's fragile home world, and of the countless humans who had struggled and survived against impossible odds. He had been just a human, insignificant, fragile, overlooked. And yet, somehow, he had been chosen. Not for strength, not for power, not for fame, but for endurance, for adaptability, for the quiet persistence that no one else noticed. A part of him feared what lay ahead. The political intrigue, the hidden dangers, the challenges designed to test the limits of life itself. But another part, a smaller, stubborn part, felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was a chance, not for glory, not for conquest, but for recognition. Perhaps humanity's true strength was finally being seen. And as he closed his eyes that night, Evan understood one undeniable truth: nothing would ever be ordinary again. The galaxy had chosen to see him, and that was only the beginning. Evan had not slept well. The palace's chambers were silent, but his mind buzzed with questions and fears. Every moment replayed the scene of the grand summit, the shock on the faces of the alien delegates, the disbelief, the whispers, the judgment. He tried to understand why the princess had chosen him. She had said it was because of human resilience, adaptability, and endurance. Those were qualities he had always considered ordinary. They were necessary for survival, yes, but extraordinary, not in his view. Breakfast in the palace was not like any meal Evan had experienced before. The food hovered in small trays, perfectly balanced in nutrition and flavor. His body, accustomed to simple earth meals, was overwhelmed by the delicate tastes and textures. He tried to eat politely, aware of the Clethari attendants watching his every movement, noting every hesitation, every reaction. One wrong gesture could be considered disrespect. One moment of clumsiness could be seen as weakness. He wondered if the other species had to endure such scrutiny, or if this was simply part of being human among the apex beings of the galaxy. After breakfast, Evan was summoned to a large chamber, ornate and intimidating, where the princess awaited him. She sat on a simple yet elegant seat, unlike the imposing thrones of other species. Her presence alone filled the room with authority. Evan felt small. "You will need guidance," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The council will test you. They do not believe in your species' worth. They see only weakness. You must prove them wrong, not for them, but for yourself and for humanity." Evan nodded, though he was not sure how he could prove anything. He was not a soldier, a strategist, or a diplomat of influence. He was an observer. "What kind of tests?" he asked. "The council will challenge you in ways you cannot imagine," she said. "They will test your intelligence, your courage, your adaptability, your endurance. They will design trials no human could normally survive." "But you are not normal. That is why I chose you." Evan's stomach tightened. I don't know if I can do this." "You will not know until you try," she replied. "And you will not be alone. I will guide you, but you must act. The galaxy is not gentle, Evan. It respects only those who persist, who endure, who rise when everything pushes them down." Over the next several days, Evan was introduced to the political machinery of the Clethari. Meetings with council members, advisors, and strategists filled his schedule. Every conversation tested his composure. Delegates whispered insults behind their hands, assuming he could not understand. Others tried to manipulate him, attempting to sow doubt or fear. Every moment felt like a trial in itself. Evan discovered that humans were being observed across the galaxy with a mix of fascination and scorn. Many species had assumed that humans were insignificant. They had underestimated the power of persistence, the subtle strength in adaptability, and the quiet resilience that allowed humans to survive disasters, wars, and countless near-extinction events. The princess explained that the trial of worth would soon begin. The council had agreed, reluctantly, that if she insisted on having a human as her bond, he must prove himself. The trials were designed for apex beings, creatures capable of extraordinary feats of strength, intelligence, and perception. They included physical endurance tests, mental challenges, strategic puzzles, and simulated battle scenarios. No one expected Evan to succeed. The first trial was deceptively simple: navigate a labyrinth that shifted constantly, filled with environmental hazards designed to exploit weaknesses. Aliens with superior senses and reflexes often failed, overestimating their physical abilities. Evan, however, noticed patterns. He learned to move slowly, observe, and adapt. He found safe paths where others would rush and stumble. The Clethari monitors watching him began to murmur quietly. Something about his approach was unusual. Interesting, one council member muttered, almost to himself. The human survives by observing, not by striking. Fascinating. Evan reached the end of the labyrinth without injury, a small triumph that surprised even him. He realized that endurance and patience were not weaknesses, they were strengths. Other trials followed, each testing a different aspect of human capability. Mental challenges forced him to solve complex problems under extreme pressure. He discovered that he could focus in ways the apex species often could not, noticing details they missed in their arrogance. The psychological trial was the most difficult. He was placed in a chamber that simulated isolation, fear, and despair. The environment shifted to mimic the worst possible scenarios: a collapsing spaceship, attacks by unknown creatures, or the loss of all companions. Many species crumbled, overwhelmed by the simulations. Evan felt fear, yes, but he remembered the countless human struggles throughout history. Humanity had survived plagues, famines, wars, and disasters far beyond any simulated scenario. He reminded himself: survive, adapt, endure, and he did. Word of his performance began to spread through the galaxy. Whispers of the chosen human reached other species, some in disbelief, some in quiet admiration. The princess remained a silent ally, never intervening directly but observing, guiding subtly when needed. Evan began to understand that her choice was not random. She had seen what others could not: the hidden strengths of humans. Political pressure grew. Some council members openly challenged the princess, claiming that a human could not represent the galaxy's ideals of power. They demanded a replacement, a stronger, more conventional choice. Tensions rose, debates became heated, and conspiracies formed behind closed doors. Some attempted sabotage, sending messages to disrupt Evan's trials, spreading misinformation, or attempting to manipulate environmental controls. Each time, Evan survived, often by noticing subtle anomalies others ignored. He learned quickly that survival was not just about physical ability. It was about perception, patience, and strategy. Human adaptability became his greatest weapon. While apex species relied on overwhelming power, Evan relied on endurance and observation. He found solutions that others could not see, avoided dangers they underestimated, and remained calm under pressure where they panicked. One day, during a particularly challenging trial, he faced an opponent designed to test combat and strategy. The opponent was a creature with speed, strength, and intelligence far beyond a human-esque capacity. The arena was dangerous, filled with shifting terrain and hazards. Most would expect Evan to be crushed instantly. Yet he observed, waited, and adapted. He avoided direct confrontation, lured the creature into environmental traps, and outmaneuvered it using strategy rather than strength. The princess watched silently, her expression unreadable. When Evan emerged victorious, the council members were stunned. They had expected humiliation. Instead, they witnessed the triumph of persistence, strategy, and calm intelligence. Evan's confidence grew, but he remained humble. He did not see himself as superior. He saw himself as a representative of humanity's quiet resilience. He remembered Earth, the countless humans who endured hardship and never gave up. He realized that the trials were not just about proving himself. They were about proving that humans could contribute to the galaxy in ways others had never imagined. In the evenings, the princess spoke with him privately. She explained the politics, the dangers, and the strategies behind the trials. She shared insights into her species, history, and philosophy, teaching him to see patterns and connections he had never noticed. She never diminished him, never belittled him, but instead emphasized the importance of observation, patience, and endurance. "You survive where others fail," she said. "Not because you are stronger, not because you are smarter, but because you do not give up. That is rare. That is powerful." Evan began to understand the depth of her choice. It was not a whim. It was recognition of a quality that the galaxy had long ignored. Humans, fragile as they appeared, possessed a resilience that could challenge even the strongest species, not through brute force, but through persistence and adaptability. As the days passed, Evan faced more trials, each more difficult than the last. Some were physical, testing endurance and speed. Others were mental, challenging memory, perception, and strategy. Psychological trials tested fear, stress, and isolation. Each time, Evan survived, adapting to new circumstances and learning from mistakes. The Clethari Council could no longer dismiss him as insignificant. Evan realized that the true test was not the trials themselves, but the perception of others. Every failure or success was watched, analyzed, and interpreted. His actions would determine not only his fate, but also humanity's place in the galaxy. The pressure was immense, but he drew strength from the knowledge that humans had always survived the impossible. One night, after completing a particularly grueling series of challenges, Evan stood on a balcony overlooking the stars. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him, filled with wonders, dangers, and mysteries. He thought of the humans back on Earth, the species that others dismissed as weak and fragile. And yet, here he was, surviving trials designed to crush beings far stronger than himself. He understood now that the princess had not chosen him by accident. She had seen what others could not, the quiet strength, the persistence, the adaptability. Humanity had survived against impossible odds, not through power but through endurance. And now, for the first time, the galaxy would see it too. Evan took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of fear, determination, and pride. The trials were far from over, and the political intrigue would only grow more intense. But he knew one thing with certainty: he would endure, he would adapt, he would survive. And through his perseverance, humanity's place in the galaxy would begin to change. For the first time in his life, Evan felt that being human was not a weakness, it was a strength. And that realization would carry him through trials that no one expected him to survive. The trial of worth continued, and Evan knew the stakes had never been higher. The first trials had tested his endurance, intelligence, and patience, but now the council unveiled challenges meant to push him to the absolute edge of his limits. They did not design these trials for humans. They designed them for apex species with extraordinary speed, strength, and reflexes. Evan was a human, small, fragile, ordinary, and yet he had survived so far. He stood in the observation chamber as the trial's parameters were explained. The arena was massive, an entire kilometer-wide dome filled with shifting terrain, unpredictable weather, and dangerous creatures genetically engineered for speed and power. Environmental hazards included acid rain, sudden chasms, and areas of extreme gravity. Advanced illusions would confuse senses, and simulated combatants would attack relentlessly. Failure meant humiliation. Death was a possibility. Evan's stomach tightened. He had learned to focus, to observe, to adapt, but he had never faced something like this. Every instinct screamed for him to turn back, to retreat, but he remembered the princess's words: survive where others fail, adapt, endure. He was not just proving himself. He was proving humanity. The gates of the arena opened and Evan stepped inside. Immediately the air shifted. Gravity fluctuated and temperatures changed with every step. The terrain shifted beneath his feet, making each movement uncertain. A creature charged at him, its four legs moving faster than his eyes could follow. Most humans would panic. Most apex species would strike recklessly. Evan did neither. He observed. He noticed the creature's pattern, how it adjusted its charge when prey moved unpredictably. He dodged not with speed but with timing and anticipation. The creature stumbled into a hazard, neutralized without his direct force. Hours passed, and Evan moved through the arena, facing one challenge after another. Each obstacle required more than physical ability. It demanded strategy, patience, and careful calculation. He built makeshift tools from the environment, using fallen debris to bridge gaps or distract simulated predators. He avoided direct confrontations, using his understanding of patterns to outsmart dangers. At one point, he faced a puzzle room, a high-tech construct designed to test intelligence under extreme stress. Doors, panels, and locks shifted constantly, threatening to trap him. Most would give up in frustration. Evan paused, taking slow, measured breaths. He observed, noted patterns, and tested possibilities methodically. Hours passed, and slowly he began to unlock the sequence. The panels lit up one by one as he solved the puzzle, his heart pounding with relief and determination. He was not fast, but he was persistent. He did not fail. The psychological trials became increasingly difficult. The arena simulated his worst fears. Holographic scenarios recreated catastrophes, the loss of friends, and the collapse of entire worlds. Evan felt fear, grief, and despair, but he focused on survival. He reminded himself that humans endured countless hardships on Earth, plagues, wars, natural disasters. If his species could survive extinction-level events, he could survive simulated terror. He pressed forward, each step a testament to endurance and mental strength. The council watched closely. Murmurs spread through the observation decks. The human survives by thinking, not fighting. Incredible, I did not expect this. Perhaps we underestimated them. These comments were not unanimous. Some council members remained skeptical, whispering that he might succeed through luck alone. But others began to see the truth. Human persistence was more powerful than many had assumed. One of the most dangerous trials awaited, the arena of combat. Simulated opponents designed with peak strength, intelligence, and reflexes faced him. These beings were faster, stronger, and more lethal than any human could endure in direct confrontation. Most observers expected Evan to fail immediately. Yet, he relied on his greatest strength, adaptability. He observed the combatants' patterns. He noted their overconfidence, their predictable attacks, their reliance on brute strength. Evan avoided their blows, lured them into traps within the arena, and used the environment to his advantage. Rocks became shields, streams of water slowed attackers, and shifting terrain created obstacles for those who assumed speed alone would grant victory. Hours stretched into a day. Evan's body ached, his muscles burned, and his mind teetered on the edge of exhaustion. Yet he pressed on. Where others relied on raw power, Evan relied on resilience, patience, and the ability to adapt to every unexpected change. Slowly, his opponents were neutralized, one by one, not by his strength, but by his cleverness and endurance. The princess observed silently from her chamber above the arena. She had chosen him because she understood what others overlooked: human persistence, resilience, and adaptability. The council members below watched in disbelief as Evan emerged victorious. They had expected humiliation. Instead, they witnessed the triumph of qualities they had long dismissed. After the trials, Evan was escorted to a chamber to rest. He collapsed onto the floor, exhausted beyond measure, yet he felt a strange sense of accomplishment. He had survived challenges designed to break him. He had adapted where others relied solely on power. He had endured when failure seemed certain. In the following days, the political intrigue surrounding him intensified. Some council members attempted to undermine the princess, claiming her choice was a mistake. They plotted to discredit Evan, spread false reports of failure, and even tried to manipulate environmental systems in future trials. Each time, Evan survived. His observation skills, patience, and adaptability allowed him to anticipate and avoid sabotage. Slowly, whispers of doubt turned into grudging respect. The trials continued with escalating difficulty. One involved navigating a collapsing space station simulated inside the palace. Debris fell constantly, gravity shifted unpredictably, and life support systems fluctuated. Most species struggled to maintain composure. Evan observed the environment, moving strategically, avoiding hazards, and using limited resources wisely. He saved others who were simulated as allies, demonstrating not only survival but also cooperation. Another trial tested long-term endurance and psychological resilience. He was isolated in a chamber simulating weeks of starvation, fatigue, and environmental stress. His senses were bombarded with illusions of despair. Yet he endured, drawing on his mental strength and experience of human survival instincts. When the trial concluded, monitors showed that he had not only survived, but adapted faster than most apex species would have. Through every challenge, Evan learned more about his own capabilities. He discovered that humans' underestimated qualities, observation, persistence, and adaptability, were formidable in situations where raw power failed. The princess's choice, initially shocking to all, now appeared increasingly wise. By the final stage of the trial, Evan faced a scenario designed to simulate the destruction of an entire planetary system. He had to stabilize volatile energy fields, protect civilian populations, and neutralize threats, all within a compressed time frame. Most would have panicked, most would have failed. Evan relied on his ability to assess patterns, prioritize actions, and remain calm under pressure. He coordinated resources, anticipated failures, and adapted constantly. When the scenario ended, the council found that he had succeeded where apex species would likely have failed. The verdict was clear. Evan had proven the value of human persistence. The council had no choice but to acknowledge the wisdom of the princess's selection. Murmurs of doubt turned into cautious respect. Aliens who had dismissed humans now watched with interest. The princess herself smiled slightly, a rare display of approval. Evan understood that the trials had not been merely tests of strength or intelligence. They had been tests of endurance, adaptability, and strategic thinking. He had survived not because he was strongest, but because he refused to stop. Every decision, every observation, every small act of patience and ingenuity had added up to triumph. Exhausted but resolute, Evan realized that his journey had only just begun. The trials had shown the galaxy that humans were capable of more than anyone had imagined. He had proven that persistence, adaptability, and endurance, qualities once overlooked, were true forms of power. The princess approached him after the final trial. "You have survived what many believed impossible," she said. "You have endured, adapted, and triumphed. You have proven your worth not to the council but to the galaxy, and to yourself." Evan bowed his head in acknowledgement, humbled but proud. I never thought humans could be seen this way," he said quietly. "We're not strong, not fast, not particularly smart compared to other species. We survive because we endure." "Exactly," the princess said. "Endurance is strength. Adaptability is power. Humans possess qualities that even apex species underestimate. That is why I chose you. That is why you survived. That is why humanity's place in the galaxy will begin to change." Evan looked out over the galaxy from the palace window, the stars stretching endlessly before him. He thought of Earth, of humanity's fragile home, and of the countless humans who had survived against impossible odds. He realized that the trials had proven more than just his own worth. They had proven the hidden strength of his species. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging on a scale that humans had never imagined. The galaxy had begun to see what he had always known. Humans endured, adapted, and survived. That was their power. That was their strength. And as he prepared for the next challenges ahead, Evan knew one thing with certainty. The trials were far from over, but humanity had already begun to rise. The council chambers buzzed with tension, murmurs, and incredulity. Evan Cross, the human, had survived trials no one thought possible. He had faced environmental hazards, physical challenges, mental puzzles, psychological simulations, and combat scenarios designed to crush even the strongest species. And yet here he was, standing before the council with the princess by his side, alive, victorious, and unbroken. Some council members still whispered, questioning the princess's wisdom. They argued that a human could never be a true representative of galactic leadership. Yet even they could not deny what they had witnessed. The data from the trials showed every decision, every adaptation, every moment of endurance. Humans had survived where apex species failed. Humans had succeeded not by brute force, not by speed, not by intellect alone, but through persistence, observation, adaptability, and endurance. Evan had learned much over the course of the trials. He understood that survival depended on perception as much as strength. He had learned to see patterns, anticipate threats, and remain calm in situations that would have crushed others. He realized that humans' greatest power lay in their ability to endure, to adapt, and to continue when everything seemed lost. The princess spoke first, her voice calm and commanding. "The human before you has proven what many thought impossible. Not only has he survived trials designed to break him, but he has also demonstrated qualities that apex species often lack: adaptability, resilience, and strategic thinking under pressure. He represents humanity's hidden strengths and, by extension, the potential of a species long underestimated." There was silence, then whispers. Some council members grumbled, reluctant to accept the reality. Others nodded quietly, impressed despite themselves. They had come to scoff at humans, to demonstrate their superiority, and yet they had witnessed something they could not ignore. Evan stepped forward, his voice steady despite exhaustion. "I am not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the smartest in this room. I am human. And humans survive by observing, learning, and adapting. That is our strength. That is our power. We endure when others fail, and we continue even when the odds are against us." The council listened in silence. For the first time, they saw what the princess had seen all along. Humans were underestimated because their strengths were subtle, hidden beneath the appearance of fragility. But subtle did not mean weak. Quiet endurance was a form of power, and human adaptability allowed them to overcome challenges no one had thought they could face. In the days following the conclusion of the trials, Evan began to experience the broader consequences of his success. Word spread quickly through the Galactic Union. A human had survived the trial of worth. The news was met with disbelief, curiosity, and cautious respect. Species that had long dismissed humans began requesting audiences, hoping to understand how a fragile species could endure challenges meant for apex beings. Diplomats, scholars, and strategists took note, studying humanity's methods of adaptation, observation, and resilience. The princess, ever vigilant, guided Evan through this new reality. "Do not underestimate their curiosity," she said. "Some species will try to learn from you, some will try to manipulate you. Remember, your strength lies in patience, perception, and endurance. Trust your instincts." Evan nodded. He had learned to navigate complex situations. He had survived trials, political intrigue, and sabotage attempts. He had endured fear, stress, and uncertainty. He was exhausted, but he was not broken. He understood now that survival required more than action. It required observation, learning, and adaptation. One evening, the princess brought him to a balcony overlooking the galaxy. The stars stretched endlessly before them, glittering like scattered gems. "Do you see it?" she asked. "The galaxy is vast. It is full of challenges, dangers, and opportunities. Your survival has proven that humans have a place here, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as resilient, adaptable participants in a larger system. Evan gazed at the stars. He thought of Earth, of the countless humans who had endured plagues, wars, famines, and disasters. He thought of the species he had encountered during the trials, creatures stronger, faster, and smarter than humans, yet unable to match their resilience. He realized that the princess had chosen wisely. Humans were underestimated, yes, but their endurance was a power the galaxy had never fully recognized. In the council chambers, recognition came slowly but inevitably. The factions that had opposed Evan's selection found themselves exposed. Attempts to discredit him failed. Sabotage was uncovered. Even the most skeptical members of the council had to admit that the trials had proven not only Evan's worth but humanity's potential. Evan was given a formal role as the princess's bonded advisor. It was unprecedented. A human, previously considered insignificant, now held influence in galactic politics. But Evan accepted the role with humility. He did not claim superiority. He did not seek power for its own sake. He understood that his position was a responsibility, a duty to represent humanity's strengths and to demonstrate the value of endurance and adaptability. Over time, humans began to earn respect in unexpected ways. Other species requested collaboration, seeking human insight into survival strategies, adaptability in unpredictable environments, and methods of cooperation under stress. Humans were still not the strongest, but they were recognized as essential participants in complex operations, valued for qualities no one else could replicate. The princess and Evan worked closely together, shaping policies that emphasized endurance, cooperation, and strategic adaptation over brute force. Together, they proposed initiatives to stabilize contested systems, prevent conflicts, and support species in crisis. Humans, once overlooked, became known as mediators, problem solvers, and stabilizers in a galaxy dominated by power and competition. Evan found personal growth as well. He became more confident in his abilities, more aware of the hidden strengths humans possessed, and more determined to represent his species with integrity and wisdom. He understood that leadership did not always require domination. It required vision, patience, and the courage to endure challenges others deemed insurmountable. One day, the princess brought him to the Hall of Records, a vast archive containing the history of the Galactic Union. "Look at all this," she said. "Wars, alliances, failures, victories. Many species have risen and fallen, but your species has survived against odds that others would call impossible. You endured when others underestimated you. That is why you are here and why humans will play a role in the galaxy's future." Evan walked through the archive, absorbing the history of countless civilizations. He realized that humans' greatest achievement had always been endurance. They survived catastrophes, conflicts, and environmental challenges, often without recognition. Now, for the first time, the galaxy saw what he had always known. Human persistence was extraordinary. The Council eventually convened again to discuss humanity's status. The decision was unanimous, if cautious. Humans were no longer considered insignificant. They were not conquerors, but their endurance and adaptability were recognized as strategic strengths. Alliances were offered, invitations extended, and humanity's voice became valued in decisions that shaped the galaxy. Evan stood before the council once more, this time not as a participant in trials, but as a representative of his species. He spoke with clarity and conviction. "Humans are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest or the most intelligent, but we endure, we adapt, we survive where others fail. That is our strength, that is our power, and it is a power worth respecting." There was silence, then slowly applause. Some tentative, some enthusiastic, but all recognized the truth in his words. The message was clear: humans had proven themselves. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now it had to adjust. The princess watched him with pride. She had chosen wisely. Her bond with Evan was more than symbolic. It represented a shift in perspective, a recognition that strength was not always visible, that endurance and adaptability were qualities worth valuing, and that humans, once overlooked, could shape the galaxy in ways no one expected. As time passed, humanity's place in the Galactic Union grew stronger. Humans became respected participants in diplomacy, science, and strategy. Their endurance allowed them to survive crises, mediate conflicts, and provide solutions where brute force failed. They were still not the most powerful species, but they were recognized as essential, as resilient, as adaptable. Evan continued to serve as the princess's bonded advisor, guiding initiatives, observing patterns, and applying human resilience to challenges across systems. He remained humble, never claiming superiority, but confident in the quiet strength he represented. Humanity had survived against impossible odds, and now, for the first time, the galaxy saw their true potential. One evening, standing on a balcony overlooking countless stars, Evan reflected on the journey. He had been just a human, fragile and ordinary. He had faced challenges no one expected him to survive. He had endured, adapted, and triumphed. And in doing so, he had proven a simple truth. Humans were not the strongest, fastest, or most intelligent, but they refused to stop, and that made them powerful in ways the galaxy had never recognized. The princess joined him, silent for a moment, watching the stars. "You have done more than survive," she said. "You have shown the galaxy the hidden strength of your species. That is your legacy, Evan Cross. That is humanity's place in the stars." Evan nodded, feeling a sense of pride, humility, and purpose all at once. The trials were over, but the journey had only begun. Humanity's rise was not through conquest, nor through domination, but through persistence, adaptation, and endurance. And as he gazed at the galaxy, Evan knew that humans would continue to endure, adapt, and survive, shaping the stars in ways no one had ever imagined. For the first time in history, the galaxy recognized the quiet power of humanity. And that recognition would resonate for generations to come. Humans had survived, humans had endured, humans had risen, and they would never stop. He was just a human, until the alien princess picked him.